I love ICMA, big supporter of ICMA. The reality is, like, the 2-year standard is like, you better have a really good reason as a manager if you're leaving a municipality. And
Yeah.
my understanding is those reasons better be like toxicity, lack of ethics, illegal behavior that cause you to leave a role before, or maybe you're pushed out or terminated or something like that, that cause you to leave a role before that 2 years, or there is, I mean, you could
Yeah.
be censured, right? You could lose your
Yes, you
credential. I
can.
mean,
It's
all
an
of those
ethical
things
violation.
can happen, right? I
Right.
mean, if you sign up for a 90-minute commute and 1 year and 11 months in, you decide I can't do this anymore and you're out, ICMA, my understanding is will come and look at that. And I think, by the way, that's something that ICMA and the association really need to talk about. I think the 2-year standard makes a lot of sense, but I think it's a conversation that the association needs to have.
There's
Right.
a
Sorry to
hot
go
take.
off that tangent, but
That's
it
a
is
hot
Yeah,
take.
connected.
no,
It is loyalty.
you know, how you guys doing?
Man, I'm doing beautiful, man. I am home till the new year. Got
Oh, good
some
for you, man.
things to close out, but yeah, I made my
There you
last
go.
pilgrimage to Belfont, and now I get to spend a little time with the family. And I was telling Brandon before you jumped on, Eden. I mean, I'm full throat into assembling Christmas presents, and every year I wonder if it's going to get easier, if the complexity of the gizmos that I've got to that I've got to deliver on Christmas morning is going to get easier to put together. And I don't know, maybe it has a little bit, but
It gets techier.
it gets techier. I've got an e-bike to
Techier.
put together today that I can just imagine
go.
is going to require a structural engineering degree to
Yeah.
interpret and piece together. So I got that to look forward to.
Oh my
So we can make
goodness.
this episode last as long as you fellas want. I'm here all day.
Dave and I were sharing war stories about holiday gift assemblies and the kitchenette, the toy kitchens. Man,
Now,
Oh,
was
wow.
that kitchenette, was that like a Fisher Price thing? Or remember there was something when our kids were that going, and probably still around, but it was like, Frank and Donna, or, Jim and Sarah, or something. I mean, someone's going to know it, and they're probably
all
yelling.
I
at us.
remember is that it was a pain in the A. I almost threw it out the window. Assembly was required. And again, I look at the instruction manual. I'm like, oh, it's a little tiny instruction manual. But what I didn't realize that it was like origami, and it folded up and it became significantly bigger. It's like the TARDIS, so much bigger on the inside.
Oh,
And I'm
man.
like, how does this little packet have like 63 steps?
Yeah,
Well,
well,
I can't relate to this at all, but I'll be thinking of you guys. I'm not ready for the holidays, but I also don't
Mm-hmm.
have children's toys to put together.
Well, I'm done now.
you're
As
not
I said,
missing anything.
tech is the day.
Tech
And
is the way.
Legos, they assemble themselves.
There you go. Perfect.
For me, I was saying like it was, and I don't think this was a Christmas present, but the memory I'll never leave behind is a big stroller that my wife bought, like a Greco stroller with the cup holders and the built-in humidor and microwave, and it was like putting this thing together. I knew it was going to be a nightmare from the jump because it comes in a box that in no way seems like it resembles the thing that it should look like. Certainly doesn't even have like a it doesn't even have the right size. You're astounded that they could fit the whole package together in this tiny compartment. And I dumped it all out like indiscriminately on the floor. And I ripped open all the bags of nuts and bolts and washers and Allen
That
wrenches
feels
and
like a
whatnot.
mistake.
It was the first thing on the instructions, big bold letters, was open package, but do not separate the parts.
Oh,
And at
no.
that point, that's when I went to
Ah.
the fridge and I got another beer, and I
There you
I
go.
went right at it. I think it worked well. I mean, it always kind of veered to the left a little bit. I don't know if I balanced the tires right, or if I was able to quite get the torque on the lug nuts that it required. I didn't.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So enjoy your glimpse of the ghosts of Christmas future, Eden, from both of us.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna send them to your
That's a
house
strong
next year.
statement,
and you
Brandon.
can-
I'm not so sure that I'm not so sure that your crystal ball is operating there. You might want to check the batteries.
If you end up in that situation,
Yeah.
we have plenty of
What about niece? I mean,
More
nieces,
stories.
nieces, nephews, anything? Are you?
I
You
do.
know,
Yeah, I've got a pile of nieces and nephews.
yeah. So
Oh,
you
8 of
nice.
got it. I
them.
mean, that's
Yeah.
And you never
Yeah.
had to. Yeah. You send it. You
Yeah,
ship it to them, and they put it together.
yeah.
There you go.
I do experiences where I can. They're getting to like the age where it's fun to do things with them. So this year we're actually doing a splatter paint. Have you seen this?
Oh, nice.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
can get like art studios. And they put like canvas on the wall, and you get dressed up in suits, and you play with paint and throw it everywhere and all that.
Wow.
And then it makes sort of splatter artwork. So that's going to be the
Oh,
going
that's
to be the
cool.
shtick. Yeah, it should be fun.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, good time.
So I think that's a good time to segue into the topic of the episode. So welcome, everyone. The Generation on the Rise. I'm here with my good buddies, Eden and Dave, yet again. And the topic today, workplace loyalty. And there's a lot to unpack, but what we've seen relatively recently and in recent years, we have a lot more people moving between municipalities. We have a lot more conversations about hybrid work or even fully remote work in some places. And just this whole question of loyalty to the organization, to the community you work for. To give us a good starting point, what does loyalty mean to you guys?
Go ahead, Dave. Get us started.
I mean, I think I think at least in the context of what we're talking about today, it's a connection to your workplace that goes beyond just the take home pay, and it's a feeling of accomplishment. It's an allegiance to your community. It's an understanding that you're part of something bigger than just yourself and your own individual efforts. I think particularly workplace loyalty and what we do is, maybe shines through more so than in other industries because there's a public service component. And I think there's an element of patriotism that's kind of baked into that. There's an element of community spirit and passion and an organic affection for the place that you're trying to build or be a part of. So a lot of that comes to mind when we talk about loyalty.
But
I feel
isn't
like you
a
just
lot of that
described-
stuff subjective? How do you know?
How do you know if somebody is loyal?
Well, how do you gauge someone's loyalty? Like that is such a
How do you assess your
subjective,
own?
nuanced.
How do you
right?
assess your own? Yeah. I don't know that I have an answer to that. Maybe
I
Eden.
feel like listening to your description there, Dave, like it almost sounded like you were talking about like the military. Like
Certainly,
I
I think
don't-
the military falls in that category. I mean, it's public service, isn't it? I mean, it's service to your country, it's service to your community on a different scale, at a different level of sacrifice, and certainly a different level in most cases, or in some cases, of danger and risk. But I definitely think there's an analogy there.
So when
What
you're
about
like
you, Eden?
job searching, are you like looking for places and thinking to yourself like, oh, am I going to be deeply loyal? Do I have an affection for this place? Like, am I willing to give my all to this community? Like, is that part of the test for you?
Oh, 100%. So when I went to Ferguson Township as my first job out of grad school, I wrote my master's thesis on agricultural preservation easements. And I case studied two counties, Lehigh and Berks County in Pennsylvania, Lehigh County, where I grew up, and Berks County, which had the most or one of the top two. Lancaster was always, kind of neck and neck with them, most successful ag conservation preservation programs in the Commonwealth. And when I went to Ferguson, one of the main draws was that the township, the municipality, actually made a financial contribution. It was more symbolic than anything, but something like $100 an acre or $200 an acre that they would pay towards the preservation of that farm. And that ag conservation connection was a huge draw for me.
Then why did you leave?
Oh, man, we're getting into a different episode altogether.
I'm sorry, you don't have to answer the question, but
you know,
like
that's
that's
all
where
part
the
of
loyalty
loyalty,
thing
right?
goes, right? Like
You
when
know-
you do the loyalty thing, at some point it's like, I don't know. We'll get
Well,
into
let me
it. I know
ask
we're
this
like 30
question.
seconds into this episode,
What-
but I think that's like, is that the driver? Is that really what we're looking for? Like, and if
Is-
so, like, if you say, okay, I am loyal here, well, when does that loyalty break? Right?
Well,
Like,
two
all of us are
different
on like our
things.
4th, 5th jobs at this point, in our careers. Like at some point we
Mhm.
left for various reasons.
But you're equating loyalty and tenure.
I'm trying to figure out the connection based on
are
what
they
you said.
connected?
Well,
I
that's what
mean,
I'm trying to figure out based on what you said. I haven't actually given my opening statement yet.
opening
See,
statement.
see, this is the rabbit hole I found myself on when I was thinking
Yeah, when
about,
you texted
time.
that this was going to be the episode, I was like, man, we're going out of the year intensely. What's going on? So
Well, I have strong feelings on it too, but Eden, let's hear your opening statement.
I'm not sure I really have one, other than I'm excited to see where this conversation goes. I think that I am very loyal to the profession. I think I'm loyal to my employer. I'm loyal to my team. I'm interested in having a conversation about what loyalty from the team to the organization and to the hierarchy of the organization means. I'm looking forward to having that conversation. I'm passionate about this industry, which is why I'm in it. I think that the fit tests, which we've talked about in different respects in previous episodes, as we sort of place managers in places, is important. And I sort of wonder what loyalty is in that respect. I will say, in doing this job day in, day out, I don't think about loyalty that much, but I think my actions probably demonstrate a commitment to public service, a commitment to what being a municipal manager means, and to my employer, but more so to my community. But I do think that there's a conversation to be had of like, where does that start and stop? I say to my team all the time, it's okay to advocate for yourselves. If in a tough budget year we came in and said, all right, we're going to need everyone to take 45% pay cuts, because that's what the community needs, none of them would do it. And I wouldn't expect them to. So on some level, if we get real with ourselves, this is transactional, right? But that doesn't mean there aren't layers, because it is nuanced. So looking forward to the episode.
But, we touched on a little interesting nugget that I want to kind of flesh out a little bit. How do you measure loyalty, right? Like, are you working late nights? Are you committing to extra projects? What does loyalty look like to you?
Is this something you guys think about? Do you, as you're doing your jobs, are you thinking I'm doing this because I'm loyal to my organization? How's that, Brandon? Answering your question with a question.
So I often work a little after closing time just because I'm committed. I don't use the word loyal. I use dedicated and committed to the job at hand, but I'm always one of the first for my subordinates saying staying late or working long hours isn't necessarily showing your loyalty or commitment. It's not disloyal if you go home on time. You also have many of you have families, you have friends, go home. You only commit to the township between, whether it's 8:15 or 8:30, because we have two different start times, or 4:30 or 5 o'clock.
In the case of our profession, on the one side of that scale, and in that scale, you put the components of that loyalty. So, there's going to be a commitment to the profession that's in there. There's going to be an affinity for that particular community because it aligns with something that you believe in. And then on the other side of that scale is your loyalty to self and to your well-being. And in that bucket is going to be your need to have a level of compensation that matches your expected lifestyle and allows you to support the things that you love personally. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but the analogy that I went to right away when you asked that question, Brandon, was the scales of justice with organizational loyalty and personal loyalty on either side.
I'm going to push back a little bit on something you said, Dave, and, not a reflection on you by any means, right?
Well, it sounds like it's about to be.
I don't know. We'll see what he says.
I don't mean to be offensive.
You can't just say that. Yeah. It's like with all due respect,
But the one thing you said was interacting with other people, and being married to an introvert who doesn't necessarily interact with people, isn't outgoing. I have employees that they stick to themselves. Like they're part of a team, but they're not outwardly, water cooler talk. They're not commiserating as much as other people, but they're still loyal to the organization. They're still loyal to the community. So that's the only little thing I would push back on.
I never suggested that you can't be an introvert or an extrovert or a certain personality type, but you always interact with people around you, whether you sit in your office, 9 to 5 and you do your job and you only have a few limited exchanges. I mean, of course you're going to interact with people in what we do. It's a social profession.
But it makes the job that much harder when you're trying to gauge, if you even try to gauge, a commitment or loyalty, because it's a little harder to dissect.
No, maybe. I mean, I don't think you're quite getting the intent of what I was trying to convey, which is that it's not necessarily about the level of interaction, the amount of it, and you need to have personal relationships with the people around you, but it is that social intelligence component of your work life that I think in part fuels your loyalty on either side to that community.
I get it.
I don't. I got to be honest. I'm sort of lost in this conversation. I'm not following you guys. So let me ask you this question. So when you're like having performance evaluations with your team, do you at some point touch or assess their loyalty to the organization and like have conversations about, whether or not they are loyal or aren't loyal and how that's, demonstrating in their work product? What are you guys talking about?
No, I
Okay,
I
me
would never.
either. I
I
don't
would
do
never
that.
do that.
No,
No.
Okay,
no,
but you
but
guys are talking about
That
whether or
sounds a
not
little
people.
like, I don't know. That sounds a little like, I don't know how that conversation would even go. Like, do you feel loyal to me? Is that
Well, yeah, but
sounds
you
a
guys are
little
like thinking
I'm
about
sure
narcissistic?
it.
those are conversations that happen somewhere,
I'm
but at
sure
least
that's
not
true, but
here.
like you guys are talking about it in a way like you're you're pointing towards things of like, oh, are they doing this thing, and is that a demonstration of their loyalty to their job, to the organization, the scales tipping in one way or the other? Well, that tells me that it's something that you can assess, and so I'm just curious how far you take that, both for your employees and for yourselves.
I'm thinking of it in the application of whether somebody stays at a place or leaves. And, the kind of calculus that has to go into determining whether, and of course, there are an endless list of, extraneous variables, use that term, that probably influence that scale in one way or the other that have nothing to do with the workplace. A family member needs your support, so you have to move because you need to be there for them. Another life event happens that calls you to another location. But all those things, if you're able to like do a controlled experiment and drown all those out and just look at the measure of somebody's willingness to stay at an organization or leave that organization, I don't think that can be measured objectively, but I think that you can reasonably say that there are variables that are fairly common to all of us that go into that evaluation.
That is a risk fraught conversation to have in an organization, right?
Especially with your
Yeah,
collective
completely
bargaining
agree.
unit. Yeah.
But one of the things you said, whether they stay or not. See, for me, seeing someone leave, sometimes it just makes sense, right? It doesn't necessarily mean they're any less loyal. Maybe they have, different life situations that's going on or a commute that takes them too far from home and consumes too much time. I don't necessarily
Maybe they
see that
can't
as an
ascend the
indicator of
ladder in a way
loyalty,
that they're
right?
wanting to, right? I don't have the expectation that most people in the workplace are exactly where they want to be for the rest of their professional career, right? Like my office is young, like we've talked about that.
Oh yeah, we
I
touched
have a
on
lot
that.
of young people in my office, and they sort of there's also people who are nearing retirement, but there's sort of a conversation. And some of the young people are like, "Yeah, I'm going to work here for the rest of my career," and some of the young people are like, "I'm not." Like that's not happening. And they may say, "I have a great job. I really like everything about the organization. I care about my role within the organization." But like when you're looking at a career that still has 30 years in front of it, change just happens. Sometimes it's desired, sometimes it's forced, sometimes
It's
it
a
just comes out of
necessity, right?
nowhere. To me, when they say things like, "Yeah, I'm not staying here that long. I'm not working with you that long." Like, I don't assess that that has anything to do with their commitment or loyalty to their job or the organization or the people within it. It's just an observation of sort of their personal needs, maybe their professional desires and other factors that have nothing to do with the organization. And I don't see anything wrong with that. In fact, I don't even like the word loyalty doesn't even cross my mind.
Let me take that thought and expand on it in a little bit of a different direction, right? Eden, you said this is my third municipality, right? We've all worked for multiple municipalities at this point. And what we're seeing is more managers, specifically in assistants, moving from municipality to municipality, right? Which wasn't necessarily the case when the profession started, right? I remember having an old school manager tell me once, that they got a job for a municipality and they just stuck there for like 30 years, which
Yeah.
isn't necessarily the case anymore. Why do you think that is?
I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. I think the times of which we're working in are consistently changing. And the current time is challenging in the respect that politics is really in play, political dynamics, which can shape the workforce, which can shape the relationship between a nonpartisan professional manager and the board happen all the time. I also think the industry is competitive. Really good managers get poached or attempted to be poached all the
Mhm.
time, which messes up a lot of the salary dynamics in different regions because you'll find managers are being maybe overcompensated in a community that the other benchmark communities might not reach, but they know that they have a manager that's sort of poachable. And so they're setting compensation there. I assume it's always been like this, but I didn't live through it. But I think living through it now, there's a lot of managers here who are climbing the municipal manager ladder. I'm certainly guilty of that. So we're seeing folks sort of take roles, do incredible things, and then sort of use that to launch into other municipalities. Maybe they're larger or different geographical location or different challenges that one organization might offer over another. So that manager shuffle happens. I think all of these things are different factors. And I think
Yeah.
in this field, if you're willing to relocate, you can sort of have the conversation of, well, where do I want to live? And can I
Yeah.
find a place that is meaningful for me to work at, where there's a good relationship between the governing body, the community, and myself, where I want to participate there, but is also somewhere that I would want to live. Maybe you have kids and you're desirable to the school district or college or whatever. I mean, that's a real thing. I think about that with Center County, Pennsylvania, right? Where State
Right.
College is located. There's quite a few people who work in the center region who desire to be near Penn State. They like the Penn State vibe, all the, offerings that come with that. Totally relatable. There are some people who are like, yeah, I don't want to live that far from an international airport. And so even though good managers might want to go there, they may choose not to. They have the ability to retain, they being the county can retain really good managers because of those offerings. That has nothing to do, that dynamic has nothing to do with the job or even the people, but just sort of the offering.
Yeah,
So I think
I
there's a
think
lot of different factors.
that's well said, and I couldn't agree more. I think coming back to that like analogy of the scale, because I think for the purposes of a previous point, I said let's hold all these extraneous variables aside for the moment and just look at the things that influence your desire to stay at or depart your organization. But you can't do that in the real world because that's not the world that we live in. And in the real world, there's a million moving pieces that are evolving at a lightning pace that will influence your decision one way or the other, that are even beyond just the life events that have always happened going back in time. And those are, as Eden described, it's a more mobilized workforce. We are a demographic of young professionals that are having children later or not having children. We don't have those family, kind of a nuclear family, in some cases, anchors that are keeping us in a spot because we've got kids in school or involved in sports. So just as a demographic or as a generation, we're just having kids later or not having children at all. So that allows us the freedom of movement to gravitate towards those communities that maybe align more with our particular interests. So it does kind of get me thinking about, again, the marriage of tenure and loyalty and whether that connection has changed. The measure of loyalty, as Eden described, and I agree with, I don't equate to how long somebody stays there. I think perhaps they're correlated, but I don't think that they're maybe linked as inextricably as maybe they once were. If I would love to get Nancy's soundbite on this because she's got, I'm sure, a lot of perspective.
Yeah. I mean, what's the ideal like tenure then, right? What's the minimum? I know ICMA has a recommendation of 2 years.
Well, I think we can call that a standard.
It's a
Wait
recommendation?
A recommendation. It's a standard.
It's a standard.
Yeah, let's be serious.
There are
Let's just be honest. I love ICMA, big supporter of ICMA. The reality is, like, the 2-year standard is, like, you better have a really good reason as a manager if you're leaving a municipality. And my understanding is those reasons better be like toxicity, lack of ethics, illegal behavior that cause you to leave a role before, or maybe you're pushed out or terminated or something like that, that cause you to leave a role before that 2 years, or you could be censured, right? You could lose your credential.
Yes,
I mean, all of those things
violation
can happen, right? I mean, if you sign up for a 90-minute commute and 1 year and 11 months in, you decide I can't do this anymore and you're out, ICMA, my understanding is will come and look at that. And I think, by the way, that's something that ICMA and the association really need to talk about. I think the 2-year standard makes a lot of sense, but I think it's a conversation that the association needs to have. Sorry to go off that tangent, but it is connected. No. It is loyalty.
And it is a standard. If you're going to commit to a position, because as we've talked about in previous episodes, having change in that leadership is such disruptive to the organization. You don't want to be in a community or work for a community or live in a community where it's just a revolving door of managers.
I agree. I think many of us don't want to work in those communities either, right? If there's a revolving door of managers, I'm not sure a lot of experienced managers are signing up to be a part of the evolution there.
There's a community nearby that I won't name, but they had about 4 managers in the span of a year and a half, which was chaos.
And
right?
When you think about the organization, right? I mean, the delivery of government services, making progress on the board's policy priorities, executing provisions of various master plans and the comp plan, that becomes really hard if you're constantly moving and changing things around in the executive's office. Which is, by the way, I think a lot of these managers who have very long tenures, many of them are retired now, but had long tenures in communities, they were able to really make meaningful progress because they were stable and in those organizations for a long time. So I think there's something to be said for sort of staying put if you're in the right spot, if you value where you are, if everything's going well because you can make good progress. I'm down with that.
And there's a flip side. There's a flip side to that too, Eden. It takes a good 2 years. right? For a manager to really get into the weeds and kind of get to know an organization. Experiencing it right now. Granted, you jumped into the pool feet first,
As I
but
always do.
typically first year is look, see, watch, start making modest changes if changes are needed, and then it really isn't until second year thereafter that you really grow into the position and really find your niche.
I know that seems like it's universally accepted in the industry. I'm not sure I've always understood that. I mean, I agree in concept, sure. Like you're not going to come in day one, month one, the first 6 months start making major changes. That's
Bull in a
really
china
disruptive
shop.
to an organization. I agree. But I also don't think that you're sitting there just watching and observing for the first
No,
2 years either.
no, absolutely not. But I think that the premise of the 2 years from the flip side of the equation for the elected officials is, hey, you can't just hire a manager and then 4 months they didn't do what you wanted, or you haven't seen as much progress as you expected, so you got to axe them. It's more of a, hey, give the manager 2 years to really get to know the community, really get to know the organization, and really start to ramp up their tenure, their administration.
So, what's the difference? Let me ask you this question. Is there a scenario where your loyalty to the board and the board's expectation of you to do take some sort of action, achieve some sort of policy priority that you think is not in the best interest of the organization, but you are going to help them make it happen because of your loyalty? Like, how does that work? And is that, by the way, a loyalty test?
I would use professionalism versus loyalty. Our elected officials are our legislative body. Will we always agree with what they want to put forward? Not necessarily, but it's our jobs to make it happen to a degree, right? Unless it's like totally toxic, totally illegal, then you kind of
Unethical, sure.
unethical. You got to plant your feet into the ground and say, again, going back to professionalism, I can't let, I can't be part of this, or I can't advocate this going forward because X, Y, Z reasons. If it's not one of those reasons, yeah, I think professionalism to the being a manager, yeah, you go forward and you help make it happen. What do you think, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, I think you can view that as a form of loyalty. You can view it as a form of professionalism or dedication to the tenets of the profession. Hopefully, if you're in that position, it's really more of a proposition of, as a manager, did I give the board my recommendation based on my objective assessment of the situation or whatever policy goal we're trying to achieve? And did they agree or disagree with that recommendation? And in either case, now it's my responsibility to administer and implement. I mean, I know it sometimes is not that black and white, but I could paint that in a light that if I'm doing something that I do not feel is in the best interests of the municipality, of the workforce, of the community, because my board directed me to do it, well, that's my commitment to the profession. I don't view that as blind loyalty or as a kind of unfettering commitment to the individuals that are on that board, so much as I view it as, I think Brandon characterized it well, which is professionalism. And I don't know, what do you think's more important, professionalism or loyalty?
Professionalism, hands down.
I think if you are professional and you're committed to the profession and committed to your role, then loyalty comes naturally, right? Like I don't think I've ever been in a situation, at least I hope not, where a governing body is questioning whether or not I'm going to give the role, the situation, the challenge, everything I've got. Right. I mean, I'm working the job, not the hours. That's sort of my expectation for my leadership team. Like whatever it takes is what we're going to do in order to deliver the results that the board and therefore the community are expecting. I'm unwavering in that. I've never really thought about it in the context of loyalty, but more so commitment and just this is what it takes in order to get it done. I know, by the way, I'm passionate about it. I believe in what we do. Sitting in a room full of many residents last night, I enjoy the fact that the decisions that are being made by the governing body, our ability to implement those decisions as a staff, is impacting the very people who are sitting in front of us. And so I believe in that and I'm prepared to do what it takes to do that job really well.
Yeah, I mean, that's really it. If you think about the concept of loyalty and its definition in its simplest form, it's just doing your job well. And you can apply that to any position in your municipality. You can apply it to any age or level of tenure of that individual employee, and whether they're a part of a road crew, or whether they're a part of a department head or in your planning department, are they doing their job well? And if the answer to that is yes, well, I think you can reasonably say that that person is loyal to your organization, whether it's for 1 year, 10 years, 20 years. It really kind of, it's immaterial how long they stay. It's just what they do for the time they're there.
Nancy, our executive producer, is providing some wonderful insight because she's just has such a deep well of insight on all this, and she pointed out that that's one of the tensions that we see in the world or in the field today, right? Like people are so fixated, or many people are fixated on this concept as loyalty. I need to be loyal to the organization. I need to work late. I got to come in on the weekend to get the job done. And that's not necessarily, at least for me, and I'm sure for you gents as well, that type of loyalty is not key. Like for me, I would much rather have a professional who's dedicated to doing a good job. And if they do a good job, letting them know when they do a good job and positively reinforcing that, right? And I think that is how you get loyalty or commitment to the organization versus staying late or working on weekends.
So one of the things I say as the new guy in town, in Middletown, one of the things I say to my team is we are here for a reason. The expectation is that we are going to be dedicated public servants and that we are going to be relentless in our pursuit to deliver high quality government services and to help the board of supervisors achieve their policy priorities, right? That's a role. That is our responsibility. That is our task. That's our charge of why we're here. And so that culture is sort of what I'm trying to cultivate. And I will say things like, I expect top to bottom, we are here to take care of the township. And in return, I find it to be completely reasonable, and I communicate this to the board also, that the township will take care of the team, right? It's sort of like work hard, play hard. It's not find good public servants, have them do everything they can to take care of the township, and then we'll give nothing in return. I think that's completely inappropriate. I think there is that give and take, Dave, which I think you talked about earlier, work-life balance, compensation, the culture that we're having, people wanting to come to work, but it is different. And I think on some level, as I think about it through this episode, that we are sort of cultivating loyalty, because there are moments where you get to a fork in the road. Like there are members of my team who were here past midnight, in public meetings 2 days in a row this week, and they're feeling it. I'm not apologetic that it happened. I'm appreciative that we got there and that they were committed to doing that. And I'm saying thank you, but it's what needed to get done. And my expectation is that the team that was a part of that was going to be shoulder to shoulder with me. So I guess on some level that is loyalty, and I am unapologetic.
What do we think about residency requirements? Guys know I have very strong feelings on this, so I
was going to ask you to run with that, Brandon. Do you guys in the loyalty sort of conversation, do you intentionally choose to live in your communities?
See,
is that part of that for you?
I don't live in my community.
Do you wish you did? How far away do you live?
It's only 15 minutes.
Yeah.
Like I work in Lower Marion. I live in Upper Marion, the other Marion as I refer to it. See, it's not that I relish not living in my community, right? As we know, Lower Marion is a very affluent community. Property values are very expensive.
I was going to say it's expensive to live in Lower Marion.
It is.
I'll say
right?
it. That's fine.
So there's a barrier there.
Yeah.
But, I've never prescribed to this connection between residency and commitment to the job or to the organization, which is not something that I've experienced in other places where residency was not only relished, but expected, right? Where a previous community I worked for, every single manager and assistant lived and grew up in the community. And I was the first manager who did not live in the community. And it was a point of conversation, right? But,
Yeah, Eden and I talk about it all the time. I mean, what the hell are you doing over there, Brandon? I mean, come on.
I often tell my elected officials, especially here in Lower Marion, like I spend more time and I give more attention to what's going on here in Lower Marion, even if it's not like something directly under me, just like community events, parades, just happenings in the community.
Yeah, all the time.
I know more of what's going on in Lower Marion than I do of Upper Marion. So there isn't really a correlation or a direct benefit from living in the community.
I mean, I disagree. Yeah.
Go ahead, Dave.
I think if put this concept of loyalty in a bucket, and as a bucket, and in that bucket, one of the ingredients or one of the components of it that you would measure your loyalty, I think, is residency, a part, being a part of that municipal boundary, jurisdiction, whatever. It gives you a little more skin in the game. I think you're affected in a different way by the policies that come from your governing body that you are, quite honestly, informing and guiding them in the process of developing. I don't think it is a requisite. I don't think it's a required piece of workplace loyalty or community loyalty, but I definitely think if you can live in that jurisdiction, it helps you to cultivate that loyalty, that commitment.
I wholeheartedly disagree.
Yeah, no way.
I'm sorry, Dave. I
And
love
that's
you.
coming from someone who
but-
likes.
You don't think that when you live in the municipality that you work for, you're more affected by the decisions that come out of that municipality?
I think questioning the
live
professionalism of our colleagues and the recommendations that they make to their governing bodies based on whether or not they are going to firsthand experience the repercussions, positive or negative, of their recommendations is completely inappropriate.
I did not question.
And by the way, that's coming from
anybody's
someone.
professionalism. That was not the question.
I think it's
Yeah, but
more
I think that's what you're
general.
saying,
Can you be?
right?
No.
Wait a second. What you're saying is that if you are more affected, that may influence the recommendations that you are making to the governing body.
Wow,
And
that's not at all what I said.
That maybe
No.
I misunderstood.
You
And
definitely
by the
did.
way, I agree with what you said, that living in the community does shape the way that you might approach it. And I'm with you, Dave, in the sense that I love living within the communities that I work. Like I live on Township Live Road, 5 minutes from my office. Like I'm with you there, but I don't think that our colleagues are approaching these roles differently because they may or may not be personally affected.
I think that's
You know
just
what I mean?
a naive way to approach it, is to say that if I live in a place, it's not going to affect in any way, shape, or form how I interact with that organization. I'm not saying positive or negative. There's positives to being in a jurisdiction that's not influenced by those decisions. Perhaps you can argue in some applications it gives you a more objective lens to view some of those recommendations. But to say there's no effect, I completely disagree. I don't think it's related to the professionalism that you bring to the community you serve.
Well, the recommendations we make are professional, right? I mean, it is our professionalism. Every recommendation we make is theoretically has gone through some sort of process with our team where we have pressure cooked that and we are signing off on our professional recommendation in delivering that. I don't think that the recommendations of our colleagues are inherently impacted based on whether or not they do or don't live within the community. And I think what you're saying is that it may be impacted if they do live within the community.
I think your professional life and your work life cannot be extricated in the profession that we've chosen. I mean, from one another. There is always going to be that Venn diagram overlap. And in that overlap exists an element of how you interact with that community because you are in there and you know that the decisions that come from that organization are going to affect you in a way that would not affect you if you lived outside of that jurisdiction. That's not a qualitative assessment. That's not saying that it's a better judgment, it's a worse judgment. I'm saying it's a different judgment. And to say that it's not, I think is just pretending that, we can somehow divorce entirely our professional experiences from our personal lives. And that's just not how the world works.
I think so. I just want to make sure I understand what you're saying. You think that this is a question. Are you saying that if a manager does live within their community, that it will inherently impact the recommendations that they make to the governing body?
Impact. Yeah, I think I would say that. I think
it would
will
influence
change,
impact. Sure.
It will change your view of that particular issue, not a qualitative change, but a change in the view of that because there's an understanding that you live in that. And it might be a product of a number of things. It might be the impact that it has on you personally. I can talk about the stormwater fee process in the first township that I worked for and the impact that had on me, not how I formulated those recommendations to the board, but of course I was going to be part of that. I knew that there was going to be a personal impact. Again,
and so you're saying that we don't think
worse.
Managers who would recommend a stormwater fee and don't have to personally pay because they don't live there aren't assessing the impact that it's having on their community?
No, again,
Is that what you're saying?
I don't know how many times I need to say that I'm not saying it is a qualitative change in your recommendation. It's better if you live in a community, make better recommendations because it impacts you. but I'm saying that it is a different lens.
But there's two sides to this coin. If you're saying the recommendations are going to be better if you live within the community,
that's not what I said. I mean, are you not like, is there something wrong with my microphone? I mean, why is that not?
Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but I guess I am struggling with the idea that the recommendations from managers who live within the communities is inherently better.
Here's a pen and a pencil. These two are different. Is one better? No, they're different. You might use a pencil some cases, you might use a pen in others. My point is that these are not qualitative changes, but to say that they are not different perspectives by somebody that lives in a municipality versus somebody that doesn't live in the municipality they serve, it's just naive. I mean, it's just not true. You also get feedback from your neighbors. You see them when you're walking down the street with your dog or whatever. They say, hey, what's going on with this issue or that issue? You have a different worldview by virtue of where you exist physically when you are living in that community. How it relates back to loyalty, I don't think it is a prerequisite of organizational loyalty, but I do think it is a part of your loyalty to that community that influences how you do your job.
So let me give a hypothetical. Being the manager who doesn't live in the community I work for, say this position opens up, right? And I'm still an Upper Merion resident and someone who lives in the community who might not have as much experience, but relatively close. So would you say that the applicant who lives in the community would have a heads up over someone who doesn't, even though they may have more experience?
A heads up? What do you mean?
Like an advantage in getting the job because they may know the community more if they live in the community.
Oh, I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I would think it depends.
Well, if we take the logic, right? If you live in the community, right? Like at the end of the day, I don't necessarily see eye to eye, and that's fine, right? Like you have your opinion, I have my opinion. I don't think living outside the community impacts my recommendations, right? Like I'm like in Switzerland, right? Like I see it, objective, I put my recommendation forward. Doesn't matter whether I live in the community, doesn't matter whether it impacts me or not, even though I understand that's not something that everyone can do, right? If you live in the community, chances are any recommendation you impact would be not, again, to your point, Dave, substantially change, but they're going to be the flavors, influences.
A number of years ago, I worked for a small borough who the governing body was wanting to make a number of changes that they knew were going to be controversial. When I got the job, I asked them, do you want me to, because I was transitioning out of college, didn't have a home at the time. And I said, do you want me to live here? They said, actually, we'd rather you not. And I said, really? They said, yeah, we'd rather you live somewhere else because we think there's going to be a lot of pressure in this community with the things that we want to accomplish, which was true, by the way. We lived through that. We said, we don't really want you to be influenced. We don't want you to be influenced by your neighbors, the friends you'll make, the social environment. Like, we just want you to sort of approach this job professionally, make professional recommendations that you think are best for the community with the information that you have, and allow the governing body to make those decisions and then, me execute accordingly, right? They didn't want those influences. So with that, I'll just say, because I appreciate the disagreements here, I think generationally, there's probably disagreements here too.
Sure.
What does the younger generation say here? What does the older generation say here?
Well, let me just as a way to put a bow on my point here. I am not in favor of residency requirements. I don't want to.
It does not sound like that, but I believe you. I believe you, but it doesn't.
It doesn't sound like that because for some reason, and like I said, maybe I'm just not articulating this right. I can't wait to hear the playback, and I'm like, Dave, why did you say it like that? But my point is not to say that it's better or worse living outside the community. My point is just that it's different. It gives you a different lens. To say that it doesn't is just not the way the world works. I think there's a relationship to workplace loyalty that, to get back to our topic of the day, that is difficult to measure and is not a required element of your loyalty to the place you work, to the municipality you serve. If you live in that jurisdiction, it's going to have an influence on how you navigate the challenges that you're faced with.
And I think what you said earlier is that you felt like that influence was positive.
No.
I mean, that's how I interpreted it.
It's just an influence.
It's just an influence.
In fact, I think it can be negative. I think it can blur
I was going to say that.
your lens.
Yeah.
I agree. I was going to say that.
Negative side,
This is
right. If you're getting uninvited from the neighborhood barbecue because you're proposing a stormwater fee, that's a pressure.
Or you go to the grocery store and you get cornered.
Yeah.
Right?
And guys, this is
Well,
coming
let me
from
ask
someone
this.
who. Go ahead. Go ahead, Dave.
What about do you think it gives you any element of credibility in when you're approached on the neighborhood in the street or whatever, and they say, Dave, what's going on with this stormwater fee stuff? And you can explain it to them. And even though you're explaining it in a completely neutral, objective kind of way, giving them just the facts, ma'am, the person that you're interacting with, is understanding at some level, some meaningful level, that, okay, you're going through this, you're going to be affected by this too. Do you think it gives you an element of credibility with the residents?
I think it depends. It's definitely not an exclusive no. It's also not an exclusive yes. And I think that too can work against you. So
I
if you're
think it
having a
gives you an outlet to
conversation,
connect,
what's that?
right? It gives you an outlet to connect, right?
Yeah. But it can work
On a
against
much
you
deeper
too,
level.
right? I mean, if you're proposing a park somewhere and that's controversial and you happen to live near the property there where there's a park, even if there's a master plan that's 15 years old that predates you that calls for that park, they're going to be like, wow, they're just building a park near their home. So that's challenging also.
You know,
Yeah, but the
I'm gonna
point, Dave,
pull
that
in.
point's well taken.
Yeah.
I'm gonna pull in
Well,
and kind of again pivot a little bit. Talking about the generational difference. We talked about it very briefly, but we are generation on the rise, correct? And my thought is, or my perspective is that this whole residency thing, right? We talked about loyalty, then we kind of fell down the residency rabbit hole, which might have been intentional. I'm noticing
Your
and,
question, man.
I mean, yeah,
You lit that powder keg.
I did. I kind of was
And boy,
sitting
was
at
it a
home
powder
like
keg.
this last night.
Yeah. No, good stuff. Good stuff.
But it is a generational difference. I think a lot more people who are coming into the field and younger managers don't necessarily buy into, commit to, or even support this idea of it's better to live in a community you work for. And I'll note to why I kind of dig a little bit deeper. I think, younger professionals are more mobile. Right? The era where you grew up in the town you work for, and you spend your entire life there is not necessarily the case, right? I'm a transplant. I'm not from southeastern Pennsylvania. My wife is a New Yorker, as I've told both of you a few times, and now I'm from cold country up in northeastern PA. So, when we've moved across the state, and I think we're seeing that a little bit more and more with younger generations. They're not as tied to the communities they grew up in or now work in. Thoughts?
In some places to work-life balance that didn't exist just a few decades ago. There are certainly people at all stages of their career and with all family dynamics and all allegiances to their hometowns that would probably agree that it doesn't matter how proximal you are to your job or whether you live in the community you serve, but it's more of a function of all of these different influences and what you believe to be in your own personal best interest and that of your families, and it's gonna fluctuate a lot depending on those circumstances.
Eden?
Yeah, I'm not sure how this breaks down generationally. I think I am willing to sort of assume that the older generation sort of got to the peak that they had set for themselves of the profession, got into a municipality that sort of met those expectations and they stayed there. And I think the generation on the rise generation is maybe willing and potentially is forced to do things that are necessary in order to sort of achieve success, in this field. I'm aware of a friend of ours in the Philadelphia urban area who's an assistant manager. She has a long commute, but she sort of needed to move. She was sort of stuck where she was previously, got a new role. It's a great role, but she had already previously bought a house. It's a whole thing. Relocation is tough. And so she has a long commute. So I sort of like came back the other way, which is good. But I also like want to be done with that. It's exhausting, right? Like I have like a personal relationship with a moving company that I use because I use them every time, and I've moved enough where that's sort of been a thing. I don't want that for me. At some point, I want to like settle down and not do this and just sort of stay still. So to see sort of
I'm a
what
little
happened.
jealous.
Yeah, me too.
To be honest, I moved from one side of King of Prussia to the other, and my family like threw a fit because of the elementary schools. Because we switched to elementary.
I thought, Brandon, when you moved from east to west, that you were going to say because it's an extra 2-hour drive with the traffic.
No. I mean,
it
was literally 15 minutes from one side of King of Prussia to the other.
Oh, good. There must be a back road
an
that I
hour
don't
and a
know
half
about.
with all traffic, but
Yeah, I'm sure that's true.
Well, yeah, we are at the top of the hour, but I appreciate both insights. We had a pretty engaging conversation
Are
today.
we going to do, before you wrap up, are we going to do an episode on like residency requirements? I feel like we should do that.
We probably should.
Yeah, we probably should. Because I'm actually with Dave that I like living in the community, or at least very close to the community where I work. So Dave and I think, are aligned there. And one thing we didn't talk about today is how that dynamic manifests differently in small towns, small boroughs, than it does in larger communities. 46,000 people in Middletown. Most don't know me, will never know me, are not going to approach me in the grocery store, like just with the size of the community. But in Greencastle, with 3,000 people, that's a different dynamic.
I think
Living in the
that's
center of the
certainly
borough
something
is
we'll have
different.
to
So we should talk
revisit
about
in
that
the new
someday.
year.
Yeah, I think there's definitely more to unpack there. I mean, I don't know. I of the 3 places that I've been so far, I'm going to be going to a fourth. 2 of the 3 I've
Was that? I'm
lived
sorry.
in.
Did you just breaking news there? You're going to a fourth?
No, well, at some point I will be. I mean, I'm in Bellefonte right now as an interim.
Right. We know
And
that.
of course, I don't live there. I live in a different
Right.
state entirely. So at least, and if you're taking
I thought
it
maybe
that,
there was like breaking news
Oh, no.
coming.
No,
Okay.
no,
Well,
I'll
when
do
that
the- I'll do
happens,
the
we want it
Sports Center.
announced here first.
Yeah.
When
Oh,
that
yeah, that's-
happens, no
I
LinkedIn
could.
post, Generation on the Rise.
It's a teaser. We're gonna drop it wherever. I was like,
Exactly. Yep.
I'll do like the
I like
LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, like coming out. Like
Perfect.
the 3 of us will be coming
Good.
out. Like this. There it is.
Yep.
No, but I think, I mean, so I guess if you bring Bellefonte into the fold, and 2 of the 4 places that I've been in and lived in versus 2 of the 4 I've lived out. And like I said, I'm not a strong proponent of residency requirements because I do think there's a lot of variation. And Eden, I think you did hit it on the head where there's variability in terms of the community itself. Some places it's better to be outside because of the cover it gives you, because of the level of controversy maybe that surrounds some of those issues. And of course, there's an extreme of that too. And unfortunately, you do hear about it, thankfully not very often, but where there's actual acts of physical violence against the manager or the zoning office or whatever it might be, typically the more public facing and individuals that are asked to say, deliver bad news to residents. You do hear about those kinds of things. And, is there an element of that favors living outside of your community? Because, and I don't think this is a hot take, there seems to be a propensity to violence in our realm in government that didn't exist just a few years ago. Whatever the causes of that are outside the scope of this podcast. But is that something that we do need to start thinking about? If I live in the community, is it going to put me or my family in any kind of physical danger, quite honestly?
No, I think those are all good teasers for a future episode talking about residency and the perils or benefits of living in the community you work for. But with that, we are at the top of the hour. I think great conversations, guys.
You going to make the announcement?
Yep.
Okay.
Go
You want me
ahead.
to do it? Yeah. So
Yeah.
Thank you. It's the end of 2025. 25 brought many good things to, I think, hopefully all of our listeners. No doubt you guys are out there doing great work in municipal management or whatever career you are. We appreciate you sort of participating and, being a part of our listening audience on Generation on the Rise. 26 is going to be a blast. This podcast is going to be changing. And we're going to be adding guests starting in January. This is our last episode of the year. Brandon, you guided us through an amazing episode with a lot of good conversation. We're taking the holidays off, well-deserved, especially for these 2. With all the things that they're up to. We hope you'll join us back in January, of course, where we will start having guests and sort of changing this podcast around a little bit and adding a different flavor. So stick with us and into the new year. So that's the announcement, right?
Yeah. Thanks, Eden. Couldn't say it better myself. So thanks for listening, everyone. This is Generation on the Rise. Catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year.